All right. Welcome everyone to Journey Through the Eyes EMDR Podcast. This is a podcast that is here to unveil and explore the transformative power of EMDR therapy. Here at Journey Through the Eyes, our mission is to support both new and seasoned clinicians and potential clients who are curious about EMDR with the necessary critical conversations and resources about this incredible therapy, as well as how to build your therapeutic skills and your private practice. I'm one of your hosts. I am Tamera J. Brown, licensed professional counselor and EMDR consultant in training. And I have with me my amazing and incredible co-host, Kathy Couch. Tell the people about yourself, Kathy.
Well, first of all, I'm just super proud that you remembered to identify yourself as a consultant in training. That was a good step for you. Our listening audience can see the progression in the introduction. So now you're embodying it. So yay.
Yes.
I am Kathy Couch. I'm here in Twin Falls, Idaho. It's a hot summer day. We're at about 104 degrees out here. So I am a EMDR consultant, and we are hopefully going to be launching our basic trainings here soon. I am the owner of Rewired 360 and then Willow Creek Counseling, which is my patient side. I believe that I'll never stop seeing patients doing what I love. So I'm a mom of twin boys that are 4. Hopefully I'll make it. Pray for me. And a girl in cheerleading and a mom. So momming and EMDRing and all the things. So excited to be here.
So grateful to be here with you all. And we have an incredible guest who has said yes to the invitation and joining us. We have Kitty Ferguson Mappus here with us today from Unbroken Abundance Counseling, PLLC. And she is an EMDR certified consultant in training and also specializes in addiction. We're going to let Kitty introduce herself and share a little bit about who you are, Kitty, with us on today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So my name is Kitty Ferguson Mappus. I am an EMDR certified consultant in training, and I own a group practice just in a little town just north of Austin, Texas called Georgetown, Texas. We have the most beautiful red poppies and the most beautiful square in Texas. So I gotta put that plug in there for sure. And I'm really excited to talk about EMDR with your listeners. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. I nerd out about it all the time. My husband is sick of hearing about it. But also, I love this topic because I was also a client who received EMDR for addiction specifically. So I bring both that lived experience as well as the training to this work.
So incredible. And so, Kitty, I loved how you beautifully shared your own personal journey and experiencing EMDR. So you bring both sides of the healing universe, right? As a therapist, and then also someone who has received, not only just being the giver and the supporter and the guide, but one who receives that. And I really I love that. I love because one of the things that is a, that I'm finding and sharing my voice in is that I just believe us as therapists, as healers, we deserve to heal too, and we got to remember that. So thank you, Kitty, for sharing that. And so we're going to dive in. Kathy, you want to go first, or you want me to get us started today?
Yeah, just go ahead and you can start. What really kind of, Kitty, what we like to talk about, what I kind of would like to talk about is we're all about the EMDR career path. So could you maybe just give us a brief background on sort of what it was like for you getting certified and being a CIT now? Could you explain that for the listening audience and maybe where you're at in that process?
Absolutely. So my EMDR training process really started with receiving EMDR from my own therapist and just living through that powerful transformation of EMDR on issues related to complex PTSD, and just that connection and hope that I received from EMDR. So that was even before I was even thinking about being a therapist or anything like that, and was part of what made me want to be a healer in this way. And so bringing both that lived experience and professional expertise to the therapeutic relationship. So, I went to school, and then 2020 happened, which, I was really in the trenches through that year for sure. And I just worked with so many traumatized individuals through the pandemic that at that time, I was a pre-license. I was an LMSW. I'm an LCSW now. But I was an LMSW, brand new to the field professionally, cut my teeth in the pandemic times. And so I went through virtual training with EMDR Consulting and Paula Marucci, and through, I think she's with EMDR Chicago, did that virtually and started implementing it right away, and found it particularly, so that would have been fall of 2021. People were still so deeply traumatized from lockdown and all of those things that they needed relief quickly and efficiently. And so I was providing that kind of therapy, and I really kind of took my time. There's so many trainings we can do. We can just fall down a rabbit hole and spend a lot of money getting trained in various modalities and specialties and all those things. So I actually sat just in that EMDR trained state for about a year, and honed my skill and just kind of let it sit in my system and my nervous system before deciding to pursue certification. And I got really clear for me on why go through the expense of certification and what does that mean to me and all of that. And so it wasn't really until maybe summer of 22 that I started my certification process. For me, it was important to get certified because my clients are very high acuity, DID, dissociation, self-harm, addiction, things like that. And I wanted to bring that level of expertise, training, and guidance. I also really wanted to have, not just to bring my own lived experience, but to have somebody check me. Where's my countertransference coming into this work, so that I could really serve my clients well? And so it was through that. I just really believe in the power of EMDR, and also as a business model. Like, at the end of the day, we got to make a living. And I will say right now, 90% of my clientele are actively seeking EMDR. And so my practice is growing, thriving. I'm in the middle of the hiring process right now, just moved into a 4-office suite within less than a year of being in private practice. And I think it's important for us to put that knowledge out there for clinicians of, like, you can make a living, you can do good work, and also survive comfortably financially.
I think that's so important. Sorry. Because I created the EMDR University so that people can know that there's this career path, that it's doable, that you can survive financially. I think with EMDR intensives, we can, definitely hone in on that. I think what you're saying is so important. I think for me, what you do have to have is a why. You do have to have a why. Why get certified? For a lot of people, it's because for me, it was, I want to become a professional and I want people to have trust and, to trust me and trust what I'm doing. And so that was my initial why. I think it's so beautiful that you've come so far in 5 years, just about. I think that's amazing. And I really like how you're talking about that career path and sort of what your why is.
Incredible. I so many layers, right, Kathy, on how many things that we often talk about in the Rewired community, and looking at on a therapeutic standpoint and a business model on how we have a right to thrive through the work that we love to do with EMDR, and that it is possible. So I'm hoping today that with the listening audience and those who come across this video who are either new or seasoned with EMDR and trying to find their way, right, on the path to doing more than just what they've been doing, but getting into the spirit of thriving, that they hear the message that it is possible. honing in on it, right? I wanted to ask you, Kitty, because I started out in the mental health field serving as a licensed chemical dependency counselor. And so I was really excited to speak with you today, especially through an EMDR lens, because when I started out, I was treating men in an all males prison facility. And then I moved to community health and was providing, substance abuse counseling for dual diagnosed folks there. And the one thing that I noticed, right, because in that setting, I was not doing EMDR, I was primarily doing traditional therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. And it would seem like they would have these awesome breakthroughs in the session. And then 3 weeks later, they were back at the same habit. And so I want to hear from you from an EMDR lens, right? What would you say, first of all, and sorry if this is a double question, the role of trauma and what it plays in addiction, and then what would you say about traditional CBT or talk therapy versus EMDR and how it supports and gets to helping and serving those who are dealing with that challenge in their life?
That is such a great question and such a great way of thinking about it. So I think first and foremost, the important thing to know about addiction is it's just a coping strategy. That's all it is. We're figuring out how to survive. And it's really in line with kind of the dissociative component, the flight part of our fight, flight, freeze. It's a flight mechanism, coping strategy mechanism. So when we're looking at it from traditional talk therapy, CBT, things like that, those are super cognitive focused, right? We're staying in our cognitive thinking prefrontal cortex. That's not where the problem lies, right? The problem lies in that emotional brain, and it's going to need a more bottom-up approach, which is what you're going to get with EMDR. I also think, particularly, you've been doing it for a while, there's been such a shift in understanding of addiction and the root causes of addiction, or what's kind of fueling the addiction is how I talk about it with clients, is that, in the 90s and the early 2000s, it was very disease medical oriented, and we brought in that CBT. And a lot of folks who've been struggling with EMDR have found those types of cognitive interventions to be extremely invalidating and almost traumatizing in and of themselves. So I think something really important for those of us who are working with addiction to note is that addicts have been shamed and judged their entire life for their addiction. And if you're coming at them with CBT of just thought reframing and things like that, they're going to see right through that, and they're going to think you don't get it, because that's not where even if they don't have the language for that, that's the feeling of it, is invalidation, being unseen. We've been told our whole life, I still call myself an addict. We've been told our whole life, like, just quit, just do less, right? And it doesn't work. And so then it just feeds the shame spiral, which makes the addiction more entrenched.
You just said that so beautifully. When people ask me part of my why, I think, my personal story with what was going on with EMDR is I was working in community mental health, working with parolees. And I saw that experience where I had this ethical dilemma because they were leaving. I used to call it with their brains open. You said it more beautifully there. But I didn't have that language with the bottom up. I'd like to hear from you and explain the bottom up for our listeners, because everyone feels it differently. Here in a minute, the story though is I was doing that intervention as an evidence-based intervention, right? And it's like, this is evidence-based. This is gonna work. This is gonna have the outcomes. And it was like, these people were relapsing, engaging in recidivism. They weren't getting better. And so I thought, what is going on? And so I've been hearing about EMDR, and Tamera and I share this experience to where supervisors had said, EMDR is just kind of like a poo-poo, or you're not really ready for it. It's something that's not attainable, but people were calling the agency asking for people that did EMDR. And I'm like, there has to be something to this. If people are calling and asking for EMDR, because people don't call and say, can I get CBT? Right. And so then I got an opportunity to be trained with EMDR, and similar experience. Like, it was just magical. I thought, oh my gosh, this is it. This is a whole, what do we say, Tamera? It's a whole vibe. It's a whole experience. It's not a modality. It's a whole experience. And it just, when I started seeing patients get better, I realized I can make a career out of doing this. I realized I can teach others and train others to actually heal that part of the brain. I was just so amazed. And it took me a long time to kind of figure out my own way within that path. So I would say for the new clinicians, like, give yourself some time to practice it, even if it doesn't make sense, practice it. And so it just, I had that same experience. And now I'm curious also on your thoughts on the Rewiring the Addictive Brain. Have you used this book? Okay, so this is Laurel Parnell. And I just started reading this book. Tamera and I started reading the book. And so we also want to mention Tamera is going to have a book club where we can read these books together. And so it has a lot of really good ideas, sort of to the tone of what you were saying with the brain and those kinds of things. I'm curious, though, just where you're at with going to the bottom of the brain, because I was realizing, like, this cognitive intervention I was doing where they were talking and narrative and community was good, but it didn't get to that core. So could you share kind of about that process and how you experience the bottom up part?
Yeah, so I love this. And I have a way of describing this to clients that's kind of funny, actually. And everybody's like, I 100% get it. So the way that I describe the human system is that we're each a mountain, right? And underneath that mountain is Pandora's box of feelings we don't want to feel, right? And Pandora's box is constantly trying to open. So we employ strategies to keep the mountain contained instead of exploding like a volcano. And we have proactive strategies. IFS might call those managers, but they're proactive strategies to keep the box closed, like ruminating and anxiety and striving and planning and hustling and all those things. But they don't always work to keep Pandora's box of things we don't want to feel or beliefs that we might have about ourselves closed. So we employ our reactive strategies. And those reactive strategies, IFS might call, firefighters, but they're reactions and they're part of our fight or freeze response, where those proactive strategies are more of, the compulsive things. So we've got those reactive strategies, and those are things like self-harm, suicidality, binge eating disorders, and addiction, right? Because we just want to shut those feelings down at all costs. So those would be your top, right? Those DBT, CBT, ACT, things like that are really top approaches, and they're dealing with the behavioral components. EMDR is like, let's go at Pandora's box, right? Let's not even kind of, other than making sure things are safe, right? Let's really not worry too much about the behaviors. Let's go underneath that volcano that's trying to erupt to those negative beliefs and those negative emotions. And when we learned those, people were not born thinking I'm insignificant or I'm shameful or I'm worthless or I don't deserve love or I can't get whatever. We're not born thinking those things, right? We develop those things. So when did we develop that? So that's the bottom up approach, really, is going underneath at what's fueling the behaviors that you see, those top of the iceberg behaviors that you see. Let's go to that under the surface of the iceberg or under that volcano and deal with those, because what tends to happen is that once you've dealt with whatever the behaviors are trying to cope with, which is what EMDR is doing, the behaviors tend to fall by the wayside.
I Love
Yeah.
that, right? First of all, Kitty, I love your whole presence. I love your whole vibe, your whole jam. You are speaking our language. You're speaking my language. Because one of the things that you're describing, first of all, I think that it validates the whole human being. I tell people or the clients I serve, Kitty, I always say, I'm so sorry you live in a society that doesn't really help you to understand how you're wired, how you're designed. You know, you're out here living in the conundrum or the universe of life, but we're not really present here to understand and even appreciate the way your brain and body functions. And so I also share, I say, you function and you drive a car every day and you know pretty much the basics. These are the basics. I know for some people it's like, what are they? What is this word with? But these are really things that we need to know as human beings, especially for our clients. And to hear how you describe, right, that first of all, addiction is a coping mechanism. Oh, Kitty, I really hope for those who are therapists and then also just human beings who will come across this conversation. Because you're right, across the span of life, and I'm so glad that we evolve as human beings, right? The lens that we viewed addiction in, because it is scary, it can create harm. There is lots of, painful consequences that come, but the human being who's just trying to survive the hurts, the pain, some things they've spoken about, some things they haven't spoken about, that they're reaching for something to help them to just make it from one day to the next. So I thank you for speaking on that. The other thing is looking at how EMDR helps us, right, to address what's going on in Pandora's box.
Mhm.
Girl, you know, you know how folks will say, I don't like the feels, or you got me in my feelings, or I don't like this part of all of that is inside of that treasure box we call Pandora's box.
Mhm.
And that is where not only the challenges, the hurts, the pains, but also where the healing that we get to witness through EMDR, where it takes place, right? Um, the question I want to ask you, because there's like just so many, right? That what would you say in how does EMDR specifically with, from an internal family systems perspective, the managers, the firefighters, and then those wounded parts, right, that IFS would identify as the exiles, how does the EMDR model, and as I call it, the journey, address those issues? If you can give us a little idea of what that looks like when you're doing a treatment for it.
I love that. So I think that when working with addictions, one of the things we have to first install is compassion, because there's so much shame and judgment. So I really use ego state. Like, to be clear, I am not IFS trained, but I use a lot of ego state work in identifying what is that part that the other parts hate a lot, right? Because there's this battle. So I have an analogy when I am doing a treatment plan with clients. First, I am establishing safety, right? 100%. Are there children while you're drinking, right? Are you driving? So we're going to establish safety and safety planning. But the other thing is I start talking about Lord of the Rings. I am a massive nerd. I love Lord of the Rings. And I recently found out, I didn't even know this when I started using this analogy, but I recently found out that the actor Anthony Serkis or Andy Serkis, who played the character of Smeagol from Lord of the Rings, used addicts as his inspiration for that character. So for years, I've been using the example of Smeagol from Lord of the Rings to define that internal part, right? Smeagol was a character who started off as a human being, as a man, and he was shamed and he was bullied, and he just wants his precious. He just wants his one ring. That is all he wants, right? And we can have compassion for that. I have compassion for someone who was bullied their whole life and they just want to feel better, right? And so they're looking for their precious, their one ring. We can hold compassion for that. And also, we can put boundaries around his behavior. So, Smeagol, I have compassion for you. And also, we still need to throw the precious one ring into the fires of Mount Doom in Mordor, right? So we can also set boundaries around the behavior of Smeagol while holding compassion. So we're teaching two skills. One is compassion. We're introducing compassion to this addict part, and also starting to put some boundaries around the behavior to install safety. So we're accomplishing two things at once. Does that make sense?
You're so amazing, like that is such a good analogy. I think that just really resonates with me. All three of us have been in the addiction field. And I think it's so amazing, that analogy, right? Because I feel like I've just wanted for those substance abusers to understand something. All of the interventions I was getting were like CBT, or let's talk, or relapse prevention, or outpatient. Let's do a relapse prevention plan. Let's talk about your family history. All of those are relevant. But if I could create a wave a wand and do like a EMDR, outpatient substance abuse, right? And have all of these things, in it, and do it different, to where people are actually healing and coming. It would be so magical, right? Because you're talking about that analogy. I think when I got into phase 2 and I realized I could use, those examples of like Smeagol, and I'm a Lord of the Rings nerd too, and, talk about, Gandalf and his transition from the Gandalf the Grey to Gandalf the White, and how do you transition, into these places, or even I forget the two boys in there what their names were, but how they transition into warriors, his friends, and how Sam was with him the whole time. You could use all of those as resources. So I think what's so important is finding out and tuning into what our patients like. Like, oh, I like Lord of the Rings. Okay, there's so many resources in there you can tap in, and then that gives a therapist a way we can use those metaphors for their internal parts. And so I like all of the ego state things too. I like, I'm IFS informed. I think it's just so magical when we see their internal transition and their own language impact them. I think that's the magic, I think that's the sweet spot. And I think if I could just wave a wand and do this outpatient program on top of everything else I'm doing, it would be so amazing, It's like, whoa, that would be so cool. And when I learned about the dissociation part of it, it's like, that makes so much sense. These shame and these moral injuries, and, the punishing. And you look at Smeagol and it's like, yeah, this is how he got there. And if we can get those parts together, he still is loved by his friend. He still, in the end, dies, but he still is loved by his friend in sort of a weird way. I remember the first time I saw him, I was like, whoa, what? This is so weird. He is so, this movie right here. So it was just, thank you for that. That was amazing.
Oh, thank you. And that's where, EMDR starts to come in, right? Because you can say, well, what did Smeagol want? What was he hoping for? What does Smeagol think about himself? What is his origin story? Oh, he was bullied and picked on. We can have compassion for that, and then bring in EMDR, where what did he need? When did he learn that he was irrelevant or unimportant or insignificant? And that's where you can start to tie in EMDR from that compassionate state, and also letting Smeagol know, or how, I mean, I start with Smeagol and then clients come up with their own names and we create this whole story, or we call it the origin story. And, what does he know, and how can he be surrounded by those other nurturing parts within the system? Because we also have strong parts, we have warrior parts. And so how does the whole system come together to make Smeagol not feel alone and isolated and abandoned and supported?
Kitty, you are divine. Oh my gosh. First of all, I want to say to you because one of the things I've been doing EMDR since 2021. And would be interesting, but my assumption here would be that when we first get into it, you all probably can attest to how big of a learning curve moving from traditional talk therapy into an incredible therapy like EMDR is. And on the journey, one of the gifts I feel you are giving us as EMDR clinicians is how to make the therapy model your own, you know? And I think that for those, and I just want to really hone space for, therapists who are new to the EMDR universe, and even the ones who are seasoned and who are coming out of the community or systems type of care and want to spread their wings and want creativity. And you are introducing us to what Dr. Francine Shapiro said to us is make the model your own as you grow with it, be with it. So I thank you for that. The other thing is you are igniting my heart and my soul for community and for human beings. I'll be honest. I'm almost like in tears because there are so many people. We live in a society, right, that often teaches us this monolithic type of perspective about the mind, right? That in other words, you should have one mind. There's so many people who can probably resonate with what I'm getting ready to say. I feel like I'm going crazy. There's things about me I can't stand. I don't like this part of me. One part of me wants to go get a piece of cake, the other part doesn't. One part of me want to drink some wine, and the other part knows I should. And so, in a lot of the times, we don't recognize because we don't have enough clinicians, in my view. It would be very powerful to hear you all's perspective. We don't have enough clinicians now that we're on the other side of COVID. And basically, the world is at our fingertips with some limitations, of course, but we have platforms where we can now help do more than just do the job of therapy, but bring the therapy, bring enlightenment, healing, love into communities, and provide information people ordinarily wouldn't have access to, such as recognizing, no, you're not crazy. Yeah, you do have different parts. It doesn't mean you have split personality. In some cases, there may be true, but as a regular, everyday human being, you have different parts, and those parts have a story. Those parts have needs. So when you talk about ego states and things of that nature, just helping people in community to be validated, you're not crazy, and no, there is nothing wrong with you. As a matter of fact, everything is right about you. Just those parts are needing support and help. The piece I want to ask you here, Kitty, because you said something, it's my word, compassion.
Mhm.
In your view, how important is the role of both compassion for both the EMDR therapist or the therapist in general, and for the human being? And I say the human being, the person who's getting therapy, and maybe the person who needs it hasn't decided on it yet.
How uh how important is it? It is all important. I mean, that is the foundation, right? I have an analogy that I use with clients called building the safe house. And basically the way that it works is you have the footing of the house, which is your your neurotype that you're born with, your temperament, things like that, genetics. You've got the foundation, which is early childhood, the things that you learned early on in life, your attachment style, things like that. And then you have the walls of the house. And those walls are built by flexibility, connection, community, and, well, curiosity and compassion. If you don't have compassion, then you're not going to be able to make sense of all the things coming at you. You're not going to have flexibility of relationships. You're not going to be able to have rupture and repair because you're not going to have compassion. The house is sheltered by boundaries, right? Boundaries are what keeps the roof from leaking and, ruining the inside of the house. Boundaries are what protects the house, bounces off those things that no longer serve us. It needs to allow enough in to protect the inside of the house and also allow people in so that we can have community connection, but also we can maintain internal connection with those parts. Connection isn't just about, exterior people. It's also internal. I'm connected to my body. I'm connected to my parts. I'm connected to my strengths and my weaknesses and tender spots and things like that. Connected to self, my soul, my mind, all of those things. It's all connection, spiritual connection and compassion. If we don't have compassion, especially moving forward, right? So I like to tell people early on in our work that part of you, that Smeagol part of you, a lot of times when you start out with addicts, that part gets triggered of you want to kill me, you want to get rid of me, and that part has become our friend. So I actually want to use compassion and connection. No, you don't have to get rid of that part of you. That part of you is serving a really important purpose. And after we heal and years down the road, that voice, my addict voice pops up in my head. And then I get curious and I'm like, why? Why is that voice coming up? I haven't thought about using, and now I have 12 years of sobriety. Why am I thinking like that's not even a thing I think about? Oh, I'm going to be curious. Why am I thinking that? Thank you for telling me I'm not spending enough time in nature. I'm not spending enough time with my family. I'm not spending enough time in creativity and art. It's my cue now. It's my strength because I have compassion for it and I understand it and I love it a little bit. It tells me when I'm not taking care of myself, and now I can adapt. I don't need to engage in using, but now I can get in touch with taking care of myself as I've not been doing. And I thank it and I bring it closer and I appreciate it.
Girl, that's a Michelle Obama mic drop. Or what is the healer? What is the healer? Rumi. That's a Rumi. Is that, am I saying the name right? Rumi?
Yeah.
Mic drop. I just gotta be with that.
Me too. I was just like, do what now?
Thank you.
Incredible.
It's so amazing, right? Like, I think the whole dilemma is like when I, I'm like, and for the new therapist, I would say, you're in EMDR, gotta do the protocol. I gotta do the protocol. I gotta do the protocol. And then you get into like these beautiful ways we can divine it and create our own self in it and bring ourselves fully, because it was very clear to me in my basic training, don't bring yourself. This is not DBT. Well, what do I do then with all these other skills? And then when I found out, like, I could bring my resourcing and my meditation and the yoga and all the things, I was like, whoa, this is so cool. And it's like, you've used several metaphors. I think that visualization is just so important. And when I realized that, it was just opening up for me, it was so amazing.
I think of EMDR and the protocol as, as therapists, I actually think what we do is more art form. We're sitting with a person and that person is their own canvas. And EMDR is the type of paint that we use. And we need the structure of the protocol because that's the memory reconsolidation, right? That's the neuroscience. That's the thing that is happening. And the way we paint with it, once we really understand the basics, that's when we become artists, right? Artists learn their craft by copying. And that's some of what basic training is. I'm learning the basics of this art form. And once you embody that and you get it, it becomes a creative process with each person and each client and what they need. And that's what we're doing.
Didn't mean to interrupt you there. What is your goal? Can you talk a little bit about your goal as a consultant and like, are you wanting to help people with that craft, or what is your ultimate goal?
Yeah, I haven't really figured it out. I love EMDR so much. I just want to keep doing it and keep moving in that direction and learning more. So in my practice, because EMDR is so financially inaccessible to pre-licensed clinicians. Let's just be real on that. That I actually offer to pay for EMDR training for all of my new hires. So I pay for that training, and they sign on for a 2-year. I pay for it like a bonus. So I want them to stay with me for 2 years. And then with my consultant in training, my goal is to then offer them free training, free certification with me, so that they can also progress in that way, in a financially available way that ultimately serves the client. So I think my desire moving forward is not only to benefit my own clinicians that work for me in that arena, but also to potentially offer it to other clinicians who want to work with dissociative disorders in this art form type of way. Because I think that's what it is. That's what we're doing. And I think that a lot of times making that pivot beyond EMDR from grad school, evidence-based, what's the science, right? Along with these kind of maladaptive things that we're taught of, we're in it for the outcome, not the income, which is just poisonous ideology to me. We are allowed to make money. We have a lot of school debt, right? For this thing that we get to do. We don't need to be starving artists. So for me, it's also about, to your point about post-COVID, whatever that is, world, supporting each other nationally, internationally, for the betterment of clients everywhere. Because, I was in my final field in spring of 2020, and was thrown into being a therapist. I was counseling African-American men in Austin at the height of the George Floyd riots. Talk about trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. And, I think that for those of us who are trained post-COVID, we're just a different breed, we're just a different breed. And I think we need to be spreading that around and getting more clinicians in that vein.
I laugh because my basic training was in 2019. I was pregnant. I thought it was one child, but then it was twins.
Girl.
I was like, girl, I need EMDR for this thing. You have this like unexpected thing. You're really grateful, but you want everything to be okay. And then they were here right before the pandemic, so I took some time, and it just was a whole thing. So I think I'm right with you there. I think it's just been very magical. And I think it's just, I want people to know how to find you to consult with you. How do people find you? What's a good type of referral for a clinician that's looking to be EMDR trained or consultant for you? How is the best referral for you?
So they can come through my website for sure. That's unbrokenabundance.com, and contact me through there is 100% workable. I'm also on Facebook. I have a Facebook page. I am in several of the groups, so people can DM me if they'd like through Facebook.
Can you share your name for those groups?
Yeah, so those groups, I'm under Kitty Dunn, D-U-N.
Okay.
It's the last name in part, so clients don't find me on social media,
Okay.
And then always they can email me. I have to say that the way that I came up with the name, even Unbroken Abundance, has to do with EMDR, which is all my clients come in and they're like, I'm broken. And I'm like, but you're not broken. And they have a scarcity mindset. There's not enough, right? There is enough. There's enough love. There's enough time, all those things. And so every time they have to say the name of my practice, it's a dissonance and it's a challenge to that negative neural network. I know, it's so nerdy, right?
That is so cool.
I'm challenging. Every time you say the name, you're building that positive neural network. So definitely, yeah. So they can email me, kitty@unbrokenabundance.com, and make a request. I'm also on the EMDRIA website, listed on there as a CIT, so they can reach me through there too.
Good. And what kind of specialties do you offer? You do addiction? Do you do other kinds of things with dissociation or other things? Maybe clinicians can find you for?
Yes, I do a lot of addiction, complex PTSD in a variety of stripes, and dissociation. I actually have clients with diagnosed DID, and I do that assessment with the MID, DES, of course, MID Cambridge, and I'm going to get training in the SCIDD, which is kind of the gold standard for diagnosing DID specifically. And so they can come to me for those things. I have a lot of training with Farnsworth Lobenstein. I've done training with Dan Siegel for IPNB. So really rooted in that interpersonal neurobiology. I'm deeply scientific and also really creative in the analogies. And clients resonate with that, right? That's client language. And so kind of, as I tell my interns, we're a little bit bilingual, right? We speak the language of science in a way that is very accessible to our clients.
I just want to say my twins and my daughters, we like the movie Hotel Transylvania, and then there they say we zinged. And so I feel like I'm zinging with you. It's like, oh yay, I found a person for my tribe. This is so fun. So I hope that you'll invite us to be part of your tribe as you experience different things, add us to your mailing list, whatever it is, because I just really appreciate the work that you're doing and who you are. I think it's so magical. So thank you so much for all you're doing. You just filled my cup today.
No, thank you so much for having me. I would absolutely love to continue working together and
Yeah.
growing this community of, ethical and financially sound trauma therapists.
I love that. Well, Kitty, you definitely amplified the song in my heart. I'm so serious, just from so many angles. As an EMDR consultant in training, and just a woman of color entering into this space, and calling on all kinds of courage and confidence, in choosing to invest in myself to grow, not just as a therapist, but as a healer. Man, oh man, have you just created such a beautiful, beautiful stepping stone, for me, and I'm sure for so many others. Encouraging hope. One of my passions is for the new therapists who are coming into the EMDR universe, for therapists in general, simply because I just think we're doing beautiful work, but we get so busy trying to get it all right, trying to get the nuts and the bolts, and we forget that we matter, and we forget to nurture the healer within us, so that that healing presence can really be made manifest in the sessions that we are providing to incredible human beings. And my goal is to remind us of the healer on the inside of us, and to kind of organically, in in a sense, spiritually, reinvite or revive the spirit of the healer, especially now for ourselves and for the beautiful people we serve. And you definitely, as Kathy said, filled my cup with that, giving hope to build, to strengthen, and to support clinicians, because so many of us need that. So I love you and love what you're doing, and love your heart for
Yeah.
your therapist. Definitely the nurturing hands there, Miss Kitty.
What I love
Man.
about this is that I could just give you a call and say, hey, how can we connect on this? Just by having you as a guest, and that relational component, you'll remember me, like, and trust me. It's just that deeper place, right? It's so cool. It's like, oh, this is amazing. This is so awesome. I feel like a giddy schoolgirl, I know, but
I know we got the giddies. Well, ladies, we are beautifully. Again, Kitty, we want to hear from you and give your voice space to say any last words that you want to share with, clients, or even just for community. What words of wisdom would you share with them today?
Oh, thank you so much, y'all, for having me. I think that, we are allowed to take up space. And I think one of the things that is really struck me since COVID is that you are allowed to be a person in that room. You are allowed to bring your humanness to that room. Obviously, you're not going to talk about details of yourself, but if you're working with addicts, they will smell out inauthenticity like blood in the water. And so it's okay to bring your compassion, to bring your love, to bring your understanding. I once asked a supervisor if it was okay if I loved my clients a little bit, and she said, yes. You are allowed to love your clients a little bit. You are allowed to be a person in that room. You don't have to be a blank slate. You don't need to overshare, but bringing your humanness and your heart. A former grad school professor of mine, Starla Simmons, if you're listening, African-American, beautiful woman, my trauma teacher, said it so well. And that is that humans were healing from their trauma before they were therapists. How were they doing that? Through community, through connection, through authenticity, through compassion. And that's what we're bringing into the room with our clients. So bring it. Allow yourself to have feelings. Allow your humanness to be in that space. That alone is healing for clients, even if the protocol isn't perfect.
Kathy, did you hear her say, bring it?
No.
Bring it. She said, bring, oh, girl, listen, Kitty, we got to have you back, okay?
Yeah, we do.
I
Yeah.
got to be back. I want to partner with y'all. This has been so great today.
Oh,
Yeah.
gosh. So, friends, community, you can find Kitty at unbrokenabundance.com. Please connect with her. Okay, email her, press rewind. And Kathy, take us out.
Yep. So we are Rewired 360, Journey Through the Eyes podcast. You can find us. We release every other week at 6 a.m. on the podcast. You can find it at rewired360.com. We have our EMDR certification and training programs to walk you through from being a new clinician to an EMDR consultant and trainer. We'll launch our basic trainings next year. So we're so excited. We'll start our consulting programs in September. We have a wealth of grief and loss classes and trainings with Stephanie Pierce, who's also a thanatologist. We have our documentation training, and we just are here for it. So you can reach Tamera, myself, for any EMDR consultation, women's health issues, grief and loss transitions. We'd love to support you in our consulting. Thank you so much, Kitty. You're a beautiful human soul, bringing light to the EMDR universe. So we're so grateful for you, and we honor and see you. Thank you so much, friends. We'll see you next time.